Hey guys, just wanted to give you a close-up view and a little bit more detail on the engine. It's now uncrated and unwrapped. 2020 Alaska Airmen Association raffle plane. This is the heart of the beast. It's 260 plus horsepower versus the original 230. I dug through the paperwork from Lycon. I didn't see anything in the package that talked about what the dyno was, so I have to call them, give them a work order number and see if they have record of that. But I'm planning on doing that, and if I can find the actual horsepower during the run-up at their test cell, then I will definitely share that with you. Otherwise, come on over and I'll show you what we got. Little maybe technical information on engines. We hear about horsepower and displacement and all that. What this engine is an O-520. What that means is the O stands for opposed. So down the center we have a crankshaft, and all of the cylinders and pistons are opposed to each other, so they go in and out. It's a 4-stroke motor, so it takes 2 full revolutions of the propeller to go through 1 full cycle of the engine. And inside these you have a piston that goes back and forth, and it sucks air and fuel in, and then it compresses that up, explodes it, pushes it down, which is your power stroke, which turns your crankshaft, and then it comes back up and exhausts out all the bad stuff, and the process repeats. So when you hear 520, that's the displacement. So when this piston is all the way down, it's sucked in the fuel and air, the valves close, and it pushes all that up and compresses it so that it's high pressure fuel and air mixture, and then it explodes. The amount of volume that it actually compresses from the bottom to the top of the cylinder times 6 cylinders is 520 cubic inches. So that's what you might hear, like a car has a 289 engine. That's what that is. Same with nowadays, most cars are in liters. A 6 liter, that's the total volume of compressed air in 1 full cycle of the process. So anyway, there's a little bit of geeking out on motor stuff for you. So we've got a propeller governor that is on its way from Wings West Overhaul. That's going to get mounted to this pad here. We've got obviously the motor mount is installed. Engine sitting on it. I just literally set it on there to check a few things before we commit to installing it. I'm going to pull it back off, and we're going to put a bunch of accessories and all the stuff on the back of the engine that's harder to get when it's installed. Get all that stuff taken care of with more access, and then we'll install it. We're going to be mounting an alternator back here, which is this wire goes to that so that they can power the bus inside. You've got a magneto up here, which is essentially just a backup ignition source, because on the side we're going to be installing the electronic ignition, which will ultimately power all of the spark plugs and give a much more efficient and hotter burn, increasing power. We can work our way around to the other side, and I'll show you some other items. So one thing about any airplane, especially when you have a range of years and makes and models, each one of them is a little bit different from the factory because they make modifications and changes throughout the production line throughout the years. So when you're trying to make a blanket approval, like in the way of Texas Skyways approving this 520 on this airframe, which originally had a 470, every model is just a little bit different. So one of the things we found and we anticipated with Western Skyways is that one of their modifications to fit this engine into this airframe is the oil pan. They actually modify and weld on a different oil sump, and as you can see, this is touching the motor mount crossbar. So in anticipation of that, they sent up another oil pan, which has this drain back here so that this bar on the engine mount won't be in the way. The cool thing about this is that Western Skyways, if you get a factory new engine and send it to them, they modify it. It's one of the things they do to modify is they put that extended sump on there, and they call it a complete drain oil sump. So the theory is that when you change your oil, you don't leave any oil in the oil pan. It all comes out. And because of that, you're not leaving any contamination. Every oil change leaving a little bit of contamination in there, and that contamination ultimately wears the engine out faster. So they've actually got an approval to bump the time between overhauls all the way up to 2,500 hours. So if you were running commercially and you had to abide by the time between overhauls at TBOs, then this would save you or get you an extra 500, sometimes plus hours, which is money. So our spark plugs right now are just a desiccant moisture absorber, and they're just a placeholder. That's I don't know if it's a salt or some sort of a chemical in there that absorbs moisture, so that any moisture in the cylinder goes into this instead of rusting anything inside. So those are just there temporarily.
We have a question.
Okay, question away.
Tim says you could put regular mags back on it, right?
Absolutely. Yep, we could just, we already have one, so we could get another mag, slap it on there. We do have the other harness that goes with the other mag, so really the only thing missing is the mag. If you bought a mag, stuck it on there, got rid of the electronic ignition and put the harness on, you could just run with regular old mags. I know there's been debate over electronic ignition versus the old reliable magnetos. Some folks have had problems in the past with electronic ignitions, but they've worked those bugs out, and we've had really good luck with the electronic ignitions. We've installed probably at least half a dozen of them, and we had some installation quirks on a couple of them, but we got that worked out, and I haven't had a single one come back after installation. And the guys that are running them are raving about how smooth the engine runs, how much power they get, especially if you're taking a mag off and putting electronic ignition on, you know the old versus the new, and everybody said it's been an increase in performance, reduction in fuel flow, so you save money in fuel, and it's just more efficient on the engine, which is better for the engine. So let's see what else. Anybody has more questions, throw them at me. We have a bunch of parts and pieces that are going on the engine. Once we get underway, dipstick to be able to measure how much oil you have in your sump. That's part of the engine. We got the mag drive gear that came off of that side. This will be incorporated in with the electronic ignition, I believe. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so we'll see.
Scott would like to know, what electronic ignition are you using?
Well, you're jumping the gun, Scott. It's right here. We'll go show you that. Electro-Air, electronic ignition systems. And in the box are everything you need. So, excuse me one moment.
Another question via the phone?
Yeah, I'll call you back, I promise. So you have a coil pack. This guy mounts on the firewall, and you build these guys up, which are your ignition leads, and each one of these probes goes to one spark plug on each cylinder. So there's two spark plugs on each cylinder. One's powered by electronic ignition, the other's powered by the magneto. In the bottom of this is a harness plug, which comes from the mag drive. So there's this guy replaces your magneto, so probably a tenth the weight. So this guy slides into the spot where the right magneto would normally be, and this guy plugs into wiring harness, which is down on the bottom here, I believe. Yep. So you got a wiring harness, and then this guy plugs into your coil pack, and then this guy, the harness, also comes over and plugs into your main control module. And this thing, I mean, it's super light. There's just nothing to it. There's some electronics inside of it. So not gaining a whole lot of weight there, or at all. And then this guy is a manifold pressure sensor. So this actually reads off of your engine manifold and digitizes the signal, which goes back to the computer, which then goes over to the coil pack and tells the spark plug when to fire. So it's essentially like a distributor in a car with vacuum advance. So it adjusts your spark instead of the old mag style. It's set at a solid, constant. Believe commit to that, but it's just set at the magneto is set at that. So no matter what RPM you're running at, your spark plug's always firing at that same point before top center to send that piston back down on the power stroke. So the downside of that is that it's really only good at 1 RPM, and you want to be able to have a varying timing so that at lower RPMs the spark advances, higher RPMs the spark retards. I believe that's the right way of saying that. So it makes it more efficient because it can vary your spark.
So when it says no more clunk, clunk, clunk from the mag?
Hopefully not. Yeah, no, it definitely runs smoother. I know. So you still have your 2 mag switches. So you have a left mag and a right mag. The left mag obviously shuts on and off the left mag, but the right switch actually shuts on and off the electronic ignition. So when you're doing your run up before you take the runway to take off, you check your magnetos, make sure they're both operating. And it's pretty wild when you shut off the mag, the old mag, you barely get any kind of an RPM drop. And then you put them both back on and you shut off the electronic ignition and you just, whoo, it just drops way down like 250 plus RPM. So when you flip that electronic ignition back on, you know, when it's running on the 1 mag, it's and then you flip that electronic ignition on and just purrs out. It's substantial. And I have nothing to gain from promoting this other than thanks to the sponsors for sponsoring it, but I think they're great and I highly recommend them.
So we don't have the dyno results yet, but do you know what the horsepower is?
Well, the rated horsepower on this engine as of 520 is 265 horsepower, or 260 horsepower. So Lycon, and again, I got to go back through the logs. We just wrapped this up or unwrapped it. I believe they port polished and flow matched the cylinders, which means that each cylinder should gain about 5 horsepower. So with that, 5 times 6 cylinders is another 30 horsepower. So that should indicate that it's pumping out 290 horsepower. And then with the electronic ignition, you're probably going to gain a percent of some sort on performance. So I would say it's probably going to be 300 plus horsepower.
Do you know what the electronic ignition costs?
Oh boy. I believe for a 4-cylinder, it's around $3,500 to purchase, and then it's a good day plus of labor to install. The 6-cylinder, I would imagine, would go up from there, maybe $4,500. So you get fuel savings. It would probably take a while to pay that off, but you also have a smoother, more reliable engine, and it shouldn't cost as much at overhaul because your engine's going to be in better condition overall from a cleaner burn.
So Bill would like to know, would you ever put in 2 of them and replace the old magneto altogether?
That would be sweet. However, the FAA, this is a certified airplane, so the FAA, they've allowed electronic ignitions to be installed and certified, but they want to leave a redundancy of having the old reliable magneto. The other, I suppose, one downside to electronic ignition is it does require battery power to run the brains. So if you lost your electrical system, you would lose your electronic ignition. So having that magneto, which does not require electrical power on board as a backup, is a smart, safe thing. Experimental world, you can pretty much do whatever you want, and I know a lot of guys are running all electronic ignitions and not having any problems with it. So until they, I know I talked to Electro Air a couple years ago, and they were working on a battery backup system so that you had a backup in case you did lose your main ship power, you could still operate your electronic ignition. And I would imagine that that means that they're also working on trying to do a full electronic ignition that's certified via a backup battery. But I don't know where they're at with that.
Did this engine require any kind of a special cowling?
No, and that's well, I don't know yet. We haven't gotten the cowling wrapped around it yet, but I'm crossing my fingers that everything's going to work out there. That is part of Texas Skyways STC, is that a 520, a stock 520 would actually be an IO 520, which is injected opposed 520 cubic inch displacement. And the injection system is a completely different setup than the carburetor system. So that would require at a minimum modifications to the cowling. The engine itself is just a little bit bigger too, so we're probably gonna have to modify some of the baffling to make it all fit into the original cowling. But that's part of what Texas Skyways has done, is they do proprietary things to the exterior of the engine in order to get it to fit into the original cowling, so you don't have to modify your cowling or buy or fabricate a new one. So great question. Speaking of carburetors, I wanted to shout out to Marvel Chevrolet because they sponsored the carburetor. This is kind of unique because Texas Skyways essentially changes an IO 520 to an O 520, which gets rid of the fuel injection, puts the carburetor on. But there's really no carbureted 520s out there, so part of their certification is in collaboration with Marvel Chevrolet to rejet a standard carburetor to provide the proper fuel flows to a 520. So that's been done. In fact, it says modified right there. So it's definitely a kind of one of a kind for Texas Skyways mods. And if you see up in there, you can kind of see how a carburetor works. Mm-hmm. The air comes in here. There's some nozzles up in here that ultimately fuel gets sucked into the airflow due to the Venturi effect. And then when you're running your throttle, let's see that side, that's your actual throttle plate. So when you run your throttle control, all you're doing is rotating that valve, which restricts airflow or increases airflow. So the more air and fuel you get, the faster the engine spins. So there's all kinds of cool guts inside these. They can be fun to take apart and rebuild. And then we have plain power, lightweight alternator, probably 8 pounds. Of course, there's magnets and all that inside to make electricity, so they have to weigh something, but small, concise, reliable, better than a generator, puts out a lot more power. Yeah, so that's from Plain Power. And then we have a full set of spark plugs from Tempest to make the bang part inside the engine. So thanks to all those guys, and I know the airmen still have tickets and need to help them out, buy their tickets, help support them, especially now in the day and age we are currently living in, and canceled shows equals decreased revenue for the airmen. So help them stay in business, buy your tickets. You can call them directly to buy them right over the phone. Anybody in the world can buy a ticket, and you can get them at 907-245-1251. 245-1251, and they will be happy to sell you a ticket, or 10 or 20. Rest of the plane, as you can see, I showed you the other day, the wings are on, and now the flaps are on, the ailerons are on. You can see the pile of cables pouring out of the wing. Those are all getting connected so that the flaps and the ailerons actually work. All those yellow and white wires you see hanging over the side of the fuselage there, those are engine monitoring probes for the JPI EDM 900 engine analyzer, which will, when we get this thing fired up, I'll show you guys the screens. It's amazing. every cylinder is going to have cylinder head temperature, exhaust gas temperature, the fuel flow, fuel quantity, oil temperature, oil pressure, manifold pressure, RPM, carburetor temperature, outside air temperature. Shoot, I'm sure I'm missing some. Yeah, the thing just gives the pilot all of the information that's going on in the engine, so you can fine tune everything and get it tweaked to get the best fuel flow and just the right temperatures and all that. Yeah, so it's coming along good. In the next few days, you'll see the engine start to fill that space up as we add carburetors and exhaust. Oh, somebody did ask about the exhaust. It's going to have a stock exhaust collectors with an Atlee Dodge high flow exhaust muffler. So that should help move stuff through the engine quicker, which hopefully will get even more horsepower to really rip off the runway. And then, of course, we'll be putting on the titanium landing gear in the coming days. So, yeah, we're cranking along, and stay tuned, buy your tickets, and stay safe out there. Wash your hands. Stay 6 feet away from people. Catch you next time.